Hello team, welcome to another ATPGEO Politics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is Ukraine War News Update, the second part thereof. I don't know, I've done so many videos, who knows what one it is. But this is a military aid video where I'm going to go through military aid going to Ukraine and developments with Russia as well. Quite a few bits on Russia and some concerns maybe with some of their drone technology coming on. Now, if you haven't already, please go and check out the live stream I did yesterday for my hits and losses. It was a pretty long one. Put it on 1.5 times speed. Get to the bit as well where I speak with Andrew Perpetua. He comes on the live stream, was unexpected, and so that's why it went on for much longer than it otherwise would have done. And fascinating chat about drone technology, particularly for the Ukrainians, that he's really, I mean, he gets to see all these videos on a daily basis of what equipment is being used and how it's being used. And he's confident that the Ukrainians are just doing a really good job with their drone technology, and also going forward, you know, with it, he has a bit of knowledge about what's coming online and the things that we can look forward to seeing the Ukrainians use. So really good news there with Ukrainian drone technology. And he was, I think, under the impression that there's definitely an asymmetry there. The Ukrainians have an advantage, but not so much. Well, potentially the Russians are doing better than we may think. I mean, it's very easy to criticize the Russians often with regard to some of their activities, some of their processes, you know, for example, the way they treat their soldiers, the way they recruit certain people, or you know, don't train them, and then they have a lack of equipment and a lack of this, lack of that, corruption and all this kind of stuff. And it's very easy to think, well, therefore all Russians are like this, and all Russian units are like that. And that's not the case. There are going to be very good Russian units that commit to their activities and their missions with great skill and good equipment and great training. It's just going to be a mismatch along the front line, and you can say the same for the Ukrainians, right? We know some of the good units for the Ukrainians, the 3rd Assault Brigade, and so on and so forth. There will be a variability to both of these sides, but it's very, very easy to think, well, the Russians are running out of equipment, therefore, you know, they have rubbish equipment or whatever. But there are certain things, like, for example, fiber optic drones. They had the advantage at the beginning. They probably still do in terms of being ahead of the curve there, outproducing the Ukrainians for fiber optics. My hope is that when the Ukrainians then catch up and catch on to an idea that the Russians are using, that the Russians have got to first, then actually the network of producers of drones in Ukraine will allow the Ukrainians to overtake the Russians more quickly than the Russians could hope to overtake. And I don't think the Russians can particularly overtake the Ukrainians in terms of some of the innovations the Ukrainians have, because I don't think they've got that reactive, capitalistic manufacturing base in Russia. They can develop technologies ahead of the Ukrainians, and they can, you know, implement them through the use of centralized procurement and manufacturing. But I think they're less reactive. It's okay if they get there first, but if it's the other way around, not so good. But and therefore, but this could be me being a bit hopeful, right? Therefore, I think the Ukrainians are better at catching up than the Russians are. But we shall see. Anyway, I digress. So let's talk. Well, not really. It's about what this video is concerned with. Okay. Now, we heard sometime back. Let's go back here to, goodness me, June last year. So a year ago, we heard rumors that the Israelis were considering sending what was potentially up to 8 Patriot MIM-104 surface-to-air missile systems. These would be the PAC-2 ones, so not the ones that can shoot down ballistic missiles. I don't know whether they can be adapted at all. I don't know. I doubt it, but maybe they can. But anyway, these are certainly Patriot systems that the Ukrainians could use very handily. And there were rumors that there's a three-way conversation between the Americans, the Israelis, and the Ukrainians with regard to the Ukrainians getting hold of these. Then we hear that, actually, and breaking news from NOL reports today, the Israelis have transferred Patriot air defense systems, more than one, but we don't know how many. Could be up to 8, but it could be 2. to Ukraine, and that's been confirmed by the Ambassador Brodsky. Originally received from the US in the 1990s to Israel, the systems are now helping defend Ukrainian skies. They become obsolete for the Israelis, who have better systems to do that they don't have to rely on the Americans for their own ones. Quote, "We agreed to transfer them. It's a pity this was barely mentioned," he said. So it's kind of like happened and nobody knows about it. So maybe, the Ukrainians wanted to keep it secret, maybe, that they were getting hold of these systems. And he's going, hey, they shout about all these other donations, but what about these Patriot systems that we've given them? No one's shouting about that. And that could be very much because of OPSEC, and they want to keep these as safe as possible. It could also explain why we had a much better, it's not as if, okay, stop interrupting yourself, Piers. So the Russians have been sending drones into Ukraine, and the drones have been more successful in getting through over time recently, such that they're up to sort of a third plus of the drones that were sent into Ukraine were not getting intercepted. And then last night we had a record number of drones sent into Ukraine, something like 479 if I remember correctly, and something like 460 of them were shot down. The interception rate was 96%. And suddenly it's a lot better. Now, you could have more Patriot systems. And we were hearing that Yuri Ignat said that 4 Kinzhal missiles were shot down successfully by Patriots. So the Patriots did shoot down, but there'd be the PAC-3 did shoot down the Patriot Kinzhals. The Russian Kinzhal hypersonic missiles. Interestingly, they're supposed to have been shot to the west of Ukraine in Dubno Air Base, a new airbase being built. And if that's the case, one would assume that they've moved the Patriot PAC-3 to the west of Ukraine, and because there's firm data suggesting there are explosions on that airbase. So that's interesting. They might have moved a PAC-3 to there and then have a PAC-2 from Israel replacing it around Kiev, but that will make Kiev more susceptible to ballistic missiles. Anyway, that's kind of probably why you want to keep it quiet. But we've had an improved interception rate on Russian Shahed sent into Ukraine. But it could also be, and someone mentioned this in my thread just earlier, the Saab 340, the ASC 890 radar plane. Apparently they have 2 of these, and apparently that was what enabled the F-16 to shoot down the Su-35 in Kursk. But could also be giving you 400 kilometers radius of, I presume it's radius rather than diameter. But anyway, 400 kilometers of coverage of the skies flying in the air. Now, if you've got that flying inside Ukraine very comfortably, then they could have a much better target acquisition of Shahed drones because of the Saab planes. That, and we know that they've only just come online because they didn't get Link 16 permission until May the 31st. So that would possibly give the Ukrainians a better capability of targeting the Shahed drones and then shooting them down with whatever. As part of the problem might be that they just can't target them half the time because they're sending loads across Ukraine from all different sort of areas. Some of them have very high speeds, different altitudes, and all the confounding variables that mean it's difficult to spot these things. And now got a Saab plane flying around, 2 of them flying around, jobs are good. So there could be various reasons for that. Anyway, back to this. So the Patriots, there are apparently multiple Israeli procured Patriots in Ukraine now, and if it's up to 8, then happy days. And it's all about building those, manufacturing those interceptors, the actual missiles that go in them, because that's kind of the part that you're going to need a lot of. Okay, next we're going to go to France, where a car maker, Renault, has been brought on board to produce military drones in Ukraine alongside, I presume, the defence base that's there. So France will manufacture military drones in Ukraine through a partnership with between a French car maker Renault, and a defense firm, with Ukrainian forces providing combat experience. That sounds pretty good to me. The Renault Automotive Group is set to manufacture these drones in Ukraine. The car manufacturer is going to work together with French SME that specializes in defense, says French aid to Ukraine, with production lines that are located a few dozen or hundreds of kilometers from the front lines. Renault has confirmed that the Ministry of Armed Forces has approached it about setting up production of drones for the Ukrainian and French armies in Ukraine. However, the company has not yet made a decision, so, hold your horses, I guess. This source, 13 Bullets, saying you're the only one stating that Renault has not yet committed. All the others are reporting like it is a fait accompli. But who knows? So, maybe Renault is still holding back, but that looks good news if that is going to come to pass. Now, Canada is providing Ukraine with another package, a much smaller $35 million military assistance package, including $30 million for Coyote and Bison armoured vehicles, along with new equipment and ammunition manufactured by Canadian companies. Again, this idea of stimulating your own economy in producing stuff for Ukraine. So hitting your geopolitical strategic goals as well as your industrial goals. It is noted that another $5 million Canadian dollars will be allocated for anti-jamming kits and electronic warfare equipment, I presume to go on those vehicles, but I don't know. The Canadian Ministry of Defence also recalled that in December last year, the country had already transferred 64 Coyote armoured vehicles to Ukraine, and I've not heard much about those. So here we have GF2146 noting that 64 Coyotes have been delivered, therefore, to Ukraine previously, but there's going to be more sort of Bison and Coyote armored vehicles delivered, I guess. Let's go and look at them. Here we go, listed together, the Bison and Coyote armored vehicles on Wikipedia. The Lab 2 Bison and Coyote are armored cars, or APCs, built by General Dynamics Land Systems Canada for the Canadian Armed Forces. Bison vehicles have been used to a lesser extent by the Australian Army and the US National Guard. The Bison is an armoured personnel carrier that has been in active service since 1990. And I guess the Coyote, therefore, is a bit of an upgrade. Coyote has been in service since 1996 for use in light reconnaissance scout role. It was initially used in the role of a medium tank trainer with armoured cavalry squadrons in the same way as the AVGP Cougar it replaced. Okay, so it's a reconnaissance vehicle, non-amphibious armoured reconnaissance vehicle, based on the design of the Lab 25. So there you go. They've got a bunch of those. They have some armaments, a chain gun. I guess it depends what they come equipped with. 7.62 machine gun, coaxial, and other thing, grenade launchers, I guess you can put on there, it says. So, but the main armament is the M242 25mm chain gun. Okay, so that's them. The Canadians have given. Okay, now 5 more countries have joined the International Coalition of Electronic Warfare for the needs of the Ukrainian Defence Forces, according to the Minister of Defence of Ukraine. More of these are Belgium, Sweden, Italy, Turkey and Estonia. Turkey getting involved in a couple of capability coalitions, which is interesting. Of course, my thought is that probably indicates 2 things, that it's industrially useful to do so, for you to be involved in supplying help to Ukraine. Yep, you might see it as a cost, but there's going to be your industries benefiting from either giving stuff or procuring stuff for Ukraine, but also kind of showcasing it to the other nations in the capability coalition, and then showcasing it to the international community as your kit goes to Ukraine. And also you get the feedback from being in those groups. So this will be an advantage to Turkey, and I guess Turkey's probably realizing that it's better to be in these capability coalitions than not to be in them. And I think it enhances your own industrial base, but also your own knowledge base as a contributor to these coalitions. Right, one or several Susana 2 self-propelled howitzers in service with the Karadag Brigade of the National Guard of Ukraine. In late 2022, Germany, together with Denmark and Norway, had pledged 16 of them, worth a total of 92 million euros to Ukraine. but only 9 have been delivered so far. These come from Slovakia, and of course Robert Fico is like, no, we're not going to help Ukraine, and so I think they were delayed as a result of Fico coming to power. But then the Slovakian arms industry is going to be like, yeah, but we're kind of making money on providing these to Ukraine. And then I've already talked to you many times about how there's a complete inconsistency with regard to Robert Fico saying, well, morally and politically, qua morally, we aren't going to help Ukraine unless you buy stuff from us. So it's like, that's really bad unless you pay us, in which case it becomes good. We're happy to do this thing if you pay us, otherwise it's morally wrong. So that's where Robert Fico sits. And interestingly, Robert Fico has said that it's unrealistic to go to 5% of GDP on defence spending. So he's publicly pushed back against Mark Rutte's desires for 5% of GDP being spent on defence among NATO nations. Right, German aid to Ukraine again here says the 11th anti-aircraft missile brigade has published a new video about the IRIS-T SLM air defence system. The soldier shown stated that he intercepted 8 Russian cruise missiles consisting of KH-101 and Caliber cruise missiles in 30 seconds with a 100% accuracy. Wow, with this IRIS-T SLM, so it's medium range. Now, a couple of things, in fact, German aid is going to note this in a second. I don't know if that's in English. No, it's not. So you might look at that and think, actually, there's not that many marked on there because they've had some of these SLMs for a long time. They're getting them consistently and will continue to get them because they've been really good, as you can see there. 30 seconds takes out 8 cruise missiles with 100% accuracy. I mean, that's freaking brilliant, right? So these are obviously good, and Germany are able to provide Ukraine with these fairly consistently in a way that maybe Patriots take a lot more effort, a lot more time. And yeah, they're not the same. I'm not comparing these to Patriots. They do kind of different things. What I'm saying is that there appears to be a more consistent flow of these systems into Ukraine. So Ukraine are going to be like, yeah, we'll have that. And of course, these then advertises, like I said before, the IRIS-T to other nations. So other nations, I mean, like if I was working for the British MOD and like most of our air defences are based on ships, essentially, and our strategic defence review is looking at air defence as a bit of an issue for the UK, especially in this era of drones, then you're thinking, well, IRIS-T, I keep hearing about that. Let's go and look at what they're doing. And so, it's all about advertising, isn't it? So that's why, HIMARS was so in demand earlier on in the war, because they've been used in Ukraine to such devastating effect. So Germans, yes, they're providing these to Ukraine, but there'll be a sense of like possibly thinking about return on investment there. Now, as I said, they've been consistently supplied, and so this one, well, in fact, we'll let German aid say it. So it's interesting to note that he's standing in front of a launcher from one of the newer fire units. And this can be seen not only from the low intercept count of 34 cruise missiles, so you might expect one that's been there for longer to have a higher set of notches, but also from the colour of the launcher. So the first few that they gave to Ukraine were actually due to go to Egypt, and that's why they had the kind of sand colour rather than that deeper green, which is an indication of a newer launcher being sent. So another interesting aspect is it's also fully loaded with missiles. This is now the second launcher that has attracted my attention because it's fully equipped with missiles. I noticed the first one just over a week ago. One can only hope that the Ukrainians have recently gained greater access to missiles. Normally, the launchers are only ever equipped with a maximum of half the possible number of missiles. So there you go. So what you can see here is the missiles are loaded in these canisters. So you don't load the missiles into the canisters, you load the canisters with the missiles, and I presume then they've just become empty canisters that you send back or discard. And when you see these, it means that that's only loaded with 2, that's 4, so on and so forth. So that's interesting. You look at the one that he's just talking about, and it's loaded fully with 8 missiles on board there. So, hot to trot, ready to go. And as you can imagine from what the guy was saying, taking out 8 cruise missiles in 30 seconds means that they sent they emptied that launcher within 30 seconds. bosh, 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 firing them off one after the other. In January 2025, Germany pledged around 110 additional IRIS-T missiles, which were delivered in March 2025. So they could well have a decent number of those missiles. Of course, with the sorts of attacks that Russia is leveling against Ukraine on a nightly basis, they're going to be using these up fairly quickly. Okay. So what do we have here? Alex Rafoglu says Zelensky is saying, we urgently need positive signals from the United States regarding air defense systems. We are still waiting for a response for our request to purchase systems that can help. So we know that Ukraine offered to, but was it 50 million that they were happy? No, it's much more than that. It was it 15 billion? They said, hey, look, we can buy loads of Patriot launchers, fire control systems, whatever, and interceptors off you. We've got the money, we're buying it. We don't want to be given them. Well, we'd like to be given them, but we're happy to buy them. Come on, let's have them. And the US haven't given an answer back. And that was ages ago, right? Lockheed Martin and Raytheon or RTX must be absolutely fuming that the commander-in-chief is not allowing a foreign country to make these purchases, a foreign allied country supposedly, to make these purchases of them. And as Jay in Kiev says, Trump is just stringing Zelensky along, not giving promised air defense units because it'll upset Putin while people are dying. And of course, the US, Marco Rubio promised to try and get air defense systems to Ukraine at the NATO summit some time back, and that doesn't seem to have happened. And well, the easiest way would be to sell some of your own kit to them, not your own kit, not kit from your own storage, but have your companies sell stuff to Ukraine. But they don't seem to want to do that, and that gives you an indication of how much the Trump administration doesn't want to help Ukraine. And NATO, talking of Mark Rutte, NATO's Mark Rutte has called for a 400% increase in air defenses to counter Russia, according to Bloomberg. Danger will not disappear even when the war in Ukraine ends, he has said. So that's calling on all of NATO to up their air defences to a much greater level, I presume, of capability and capacity. Okay, going on to Ukraine's own defence manufacturing. Ukraine will have its own ballistic missiles. The missile has already passed successful tests, having overcome almost 300 kilometers, as in having reached a range of 300 kilometers. Now it is being launched into mass production, according to the Central Defence Agency. I wonder whether it's quite a good source, actually, Bulgarian military here. So let's have a little look at this, as someone's pointed this out. So June the 6th, a couple of days ago, Ukraine announced a significant milestone in its defence capabilities, claiming it had built a stockpile of domestically produced ballistic missiles. The development could reshape its ongoing conflict with Russia. Interesting to say it's got a stockpile here. Okay, the statement attributed to Ukraine's defence authorities follows successful tests of a missile capable of striking targets nearly 300 kilometres away, with mass production now underway. This achievement marks a pivotal step for Kiev, which has long relied on Western-supplied weapons to counter Moscow's aggression. The announcement so essentially this is your ATACMS, really, your unitary warhead ATACMS, assuming that it is only a unitary warhead. The announcement, echoed in social media posts on platforms like X, underscores Ukraine's push to bolster its arsenal amid restrictions on using foreign missiles for deep strikes into Russian territory. As the war enters its fourth year, this new capability could enhance Ukraine's ability to deter Russian advances and assert greater strategic autonomy. The missile in question is believed to be the Hrim-2. So this has been under development, I guess, since the beginning of the war. I was reporting on the Hrim-2 ages ago. In fact, there were claims that it's been used before, but it then might be in a case of needing to go back to the drawing board or tinker with it because of whatever issue it has had. Hrim, I think, means thunder. So Hrim-2, also known as a Sapsan in its export variant, a project rooted in Ukraine's Soviet-era expertise in rocket technology, developed by the Yuzhnoye Design Bureau and produced by Yuzmash in Dnipro. The Hrim-2 is a short-range ballistic missile designed for precision strikes, boasting a range of approximately 280 to 500 kilometers, depending on its configuration. It carries a warhead weighing up to 500 kilograms. Now, the Iskander M is 480 kilograms, so this looks perfectly well, not analogous. I don't think it's. I think the Iskander's probably got a bit more range. I don't know actually. A missile's guidance system likely combines inertial navigation with GPS corrections, enable it to hit targets with high accuracy, and that gives it resiliency to electronic warfare because it can rely on inertial navigation and GPS. GPS can often get spanned and whatnot. Its mobile launch platform, typically mounted on a wheeled chassis, allows for rapid deployment and concealment, making it a challenging target for enemy forces. The V2U's design draws on decades of Ukrainian engineering, with roots tracing back to the Soviet R-16 and R-12 missiles, which were among the first to carry nuclear warheads. Unlike its predecessors, it's tailored for conventional warfare, offering Ukraine a tool to strike Russian military infrastructure, command posts, or supply lines at significant distances. Now, I think they're going to be hitting nearby air bases within that 300-kilometer range that they were hoping to do with ATACMS, but then they never got the ATACMS, and when they finally did get them and get the permission to use them, Russia had already moved their stuff out of range. I don't know what's in range in terms of air bases and airframes within that 300-kilometer range, but if it's 500 kilometers, then you've got some options. So I would assume that as valuable as these ballistic missiles will be, they'll be calculating one for one in terms of swapping out a Su-35 or a whatever Sukhoi it is, or even a MiG for one of these missiles would be a good calculation. I think they'd be happy with that. Since Russia's full-scale invasion in February 2022, Kyiv's relied heavily on systems like ATACMS and Storm Shadows and Scalps for long-range strikes. However, these weapons come with restrictions from Western allies wary of escalation, and so on and so forth. Our long-range capabilities are a clear and effective guarantee of Ukraine's security, said Zelensky on the 2nd of May, emphasising the need to accelerate domestic missile production. I think this has been... I've been frustrated because right at the beginning of the war, I was saying you need your long-range missiles, and they need shed loads of them. So it's just, obviously, it's easier said than done. It's easy for some Egypt like me to sit in an office in the south coast of the UK and say, "Oh, you need to make more missiles. Oh, why can't you make more missiles?" And they're like, "Do you know how long it takes to develop a ballistic missile from scratch, or even from using a baseline already? Do you know how long? Do you know how long, JP? No, you don't, do you? Because you don't know what you're talking about." So, yeah, it takes a long time. And there are some that claim that actually they have expedited this process quite considerably. And the sort of thing that you're seeing here might normally take sort of 6 years or something. And that actually they've done it in a couple of years. So in August 2024, Zelensky first announced a successful test of a Ukrainian ballistic missile, but we still haven't really seen them. At least we're not aware that they've been used yet. I don't know if they definitely got a stockpile. It'd be great if they do have a stockpile, and then I'd imagine Ukrainians will want to stockpile these and not use them for some time until they've got a decent enough stockpile and the ability to fire lots in the same night. Because what you don't want to do is fire like 5 of these missiles just to kind of test them out and send a bunch of these missiles into an airbase one night, and then the Russians go, "Oh, shite," right, and then move all their stuff back behind 500 kilometers, because then you've lost the ability to strike those things. So you're going to want to stockpile these but you also need the launchers. Stockpile them, build enough launchers until, my opinion would be, you want to send 40, I don't know, you want to send 1,000 of these, ideally, whatever it is, you want to send as many of these as possible in one night at the Russians, whilst also overcoming air defenses with drones and maybe other missiles and missile drones and all sorts, so that they don't know what to hit, don't know how, they can't hit them all. And then, also in the middle of them, you're sending an absolute ton of ballistics that are very difficult for the Russians to shoot down at those air bases and really high value targets. So, if this is true, and if they have stockpiled or are stockpiling ballistic missiles, then this is really, really good news for Ukraine, because this is how they prevail in the war. This is how they win the war. Drones, FPV and all sorts of different types of drone, bomber drones, getting asymmetrical advantages there on the front line. Medium range drones, so up to like 50 kilometers, bomber drones and whatever, hitting targets in the rear. And then you want missiles, long-range one-way attack drones, and ballistic missiles and cruise missiles, and guided glide bombs and air aviation advantage and all that. That's how you do it. Distance munitions, getting the advantage for the Ukrainians. So this is can only, if it's true, is only good news. It's exactly what is wanted. So the Patriots' capabilities place it in a competitive class of short-range ballistic missiles. For comparison, Russia's Iskander M has a range of up to 500 kilometers, and carries a warhead of similar weight. However, the Iskander M benefits from Russia's larger production capacity, which estimates suggesting Moscow can produce dozens of these missiles monthly. Well, actually, funny you should mention that. I've got something here that says Russia significantly increased the production of Iskander missiles. According to the GUR, the enemy produces 60 missiles per month, while last year this figure was at the level of 40 per month. The aggressor country already has about 600 units. So the claim here is that they've stockpiled 600 units. So the claim there is 60 missiles a month, up from 40, whereas this article is claiming that it can produce dozens monthly. So that'd be dozens. How many dozens? 3 dozen would be 36. So it's considerably higher than this article is suggesting, is what the GUR is claiming. Now, the US made ATACMS supplied to Ukraine offers a range of up to 300 kilometers, but has limited availability and political constraints. North Korea's KN-23, used by the Russian forces, has a range of up to 800 kilometers, but has shown inconsistent accuracy. According to Ukrainian sources, the HUN-2's advantage lies in its domestic origin, freeing Ukraine from external restrictions and supply chain bottlenecks. Its reported precision, potentially within 50 meters of a target, makes it a viable tool for striking high-value assets like airfields or logistics hubs. Now, 50 meters isn't like a HIMARS, which can pretty much hit on the spot. You got, in fact, if I put CEP HIMARS, that you've got. I wonder what that is. Well, it depends. That's actually unfair because the HIMARS doesn't have a CEP. The missile that you fire has the CEP. So let's have a look. Okay, I've gone to AI that says it depends on the specific munition, but the circle error probable, i.e. how many times. No, it's where it hits within that distance 50% of the time. So the CEP, circle error probable, for the M31 Gimler's rocket, commonly fired from HIMARS, has a CEP of 10 meters. It means that 50% of rockets fired will land within 10 meter radius of the target. HIMARS is no high precision, so on and so forth. I wonder whether we put in CEP ATACMS and see if that just comes. ATACMS missile, a CP of around 10 meters, meaning that so 10 meters for the ATACMS and the other Gimler's missiles from the HIMARS. Now we're moving to 50 meters. So the CP for this is 50 meters, and it's considerably less accurate than what the American missiles will give you, which it's a viable tool for striking high value assets. When you're talking about hitting airfields, it means you're going to have to send more of these missiles in to do the damage you want to do, because the likelihood is it's not going to be the pinpoint accuracy you would need. If you get a Gimler's missile sent that's only 10 meters from a plane, the amount of shrapnel that kicks up is going to shred the plane. You start getting to 50 meters away, and the plane might get away with it a little bit more. Okay, so there you go. Hopefully, that's me banging on far too long about that. Ukraine will have its own ballistic missile. So warhead is 400 kilograms. Says this report, we heard 500 kilograms, and that makes quite a big difference. But other than that, it's now being launched into mass production. So lots of people reporting that. Andrew Perpetua, and he talked about this in my live stream I mentioned yesterday. And by the way, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so. It's really helps. So please subscribe. When you think about drones in Ukraine, please stop focusing on FPV drones. We spent a lot of time talking about this in the video yesterday. There are so many other types of drones, many of which are more powerful and more useful than FPV drones. He was saying that FPV drones have become, they are just the bog standard drones. You know, it's like banging on about artillery shells these days. Like, okay, you know, your basic, normal, no change artillery shell. Yeah, wonderful. Okay, but now we've got like volcano precision guided shells that can go 70 kilometers and do this, right? Let's talk about that. That's the exciting stuff. So you're saying FPV drones are just like 10 a penny. They do a good job, but it's not where the cutting edge is, and it's not where the Ukrainians are focusing, yet they're producing loads of those, but they're also doing some really funky stuff with other things. In my opinion, FPV drones peaked in importance in a pretty long time ago, and there are other types that have nowhere near peaked yet. Vampire, Kazan, and Heavy Shot are three most important drones right now, in my opinion. Not only do they do critically important things like laying minefields and dropping deadly bombs, but they deliver supplies, food, and ammo. They carry construction equipment, comms, and electronic warfare. Plus, the range of heavy bombers is so absurd. One killed a damn S-300. So an S-300, I didn't know about that, but an S-300 being hit by a heavy bomber, at least I don't think I did. I may have I've reported on so much. S-300 is going to be quite far back from the front line, really. So to be hit with a heavy drone bomber is a bit of an embarrassment for the Russians, but also just goes to show the improved capability of these heavy bomber drones in terms of being able to get quite far into the Russian rear. Now, going on to Russian bits of kit here, a Russian ground robot on fiber optics here carrying a drone on fiber optics. So you've got a fiber optic UGV carrying a fiber optic UAV. You can see the big spool of fiber optic cabling there for the UGV, and then wow, that's a massive spool given the size of the drone there for that drone. I wonder how much that impacts the ability for that, unless it's just a reconnaissance drone. It has no munition on board, but that's going to affect the obviously the payload for that drone, what it can take. But that's where we're at the moment. Drones carrying mothership drones, or mother tracked vehicle drones carrying other drones. Incredible innovation that's taking place. So a Russian military journalist says that the Russian manufacturers won't produce electronic warfare drones because the more drones shot down at the front, the more orders they have. It's said to illustrate how they treat the war as a get-rich-quick scheme, which is incredible. So you've got these interceptors. The Ukrainian interceptor drones are now doing an amazing job of taking out these Russian medium-range reconnaissance and kamikaze drones. Andrew Perpetua was talking about this yesterday, about the increased range and whatnot, and there was an interceptor drone that was recently taken out by one of an interceptor drone from Magyar's birds recently took out a Russian Orlan 10. I think it was an Orlan 10, 33 kilometers behind the Russian border, like into the Russian territory, 33 kilometers, so plus some distance where you're actually sending it from, plus it needs to get up to pretty high height. So you're talking a really significant range for these interceptor drones that are now going and taking out the Russian reconnaissance drones at a distance whereby they're not even getting to the front line, let alone over the Ukrainian territory before they're blown up. They're getting blown up 33 kilometers into Russia. Incredible. And here the claim is from Chris Owicki that the Russian manufacturers won't produce electronic warfare drones because, well, we'll see why. Alexei Sukonkin quotes a correspondent on how the developers of a flying electronic warfare system created in 2023 have found a complete lack of interest from Russian drone manufacturers despite the increasing threat from Ukrainian drones. Quote, our subscribers saw full-scale exhibits and heard a speech by the authors of the development at the Army 2023 exhibition, an unmanned aerial system for electronic suppression of FPV drones. The main difference of the proposed solution was that the FPV drone video channel jammers were installed on drones, UAVs, which circle for hours above the area of coverage. Within a radius of at least 5 kilometers from such a flying electronic warfare complex, video from drones was completely blocked, making it impossible to control them. Enthusiast developers said that they offered their equipment to various departments, confirmed their characteristics at testing grounds, but never found solvent customers. At Army 2024 exhibition, representatives of various branches of the armed forces and volunteer battalions constantly stopped by their stand, but this information never made it to the next level, and again, no customers were found. In the Special Military Operations Zone, drones account for almost 90% of personnel losses, and now kamikaze FPVs have reached airfields deep in Russia, causing billions of rubles in damage to to budget funds, maybe something will change in Army 2030. Sukonkin, who is quite clearly upset about the situation, judging from the amount of capitals and bold text he uses, says that, in fact, the situation is not about the lack of solvent customers, but is down to the manufacturer's greed. Now, I will give you something very unpleasant for some businessmen of the military-industrial complex, all caps. Our reconnaissance unmanned aircraft currently suffer the main losses from the impact of enemy fighter drones. To give an idea of the scale, dozens of such machines are destroyed every day, and an electronic warfare station, I repeat, costing 1% of the total price of the drone, is guaranteed to protect a reconnaissance aircraft from destruction and, very important, save the country's military budget if the machines stops being destroyed on such a scale. During the Great Patriotic War, for the unjustified loss of military property, financially accountable persons were simply shot, which instilled the Red Army a careful and economic attitude towards the entrusted military equipment, without which it was impossible to achieve victory over the enemy, even in the highest heroism. In turn, the Soviet defense industry sought to minimize the cost of producing military equipment, reducing the cost and thereby expanding production. This fundamentally distinguished the Soviet industry from the German one, where commerce flourished and the purchase price was constantly inflated. This, in my opinion, was a main factor in the victory, which could not have been achieved by heroism alone. Let's get back to today, though. In official conversations, manufacturers talk about the impossibility of passing state tests of electronic warfare before adopting it into service and other bureaucratic nonsense. In unofficial conversations, drone manufacturers directly say that they are, all caps, not interested in having electronic warfare stations on board the drone, because the more drones shot down at the front, the more orders they have. So in other words, this is me now talking, they are motivated by having their drones shot down. They don't want electronic warfare to save their drones, because the more drones are shot down, the more drones get ordered. Thank you very much. We'll sell more drones. So please don't protect them. Let's just sell them to them. They get used disposably rather than used and protected. I would like drone and not only drone manufacturers to prove, so UAV aerial drone manufacturers, to prove in action that they are interested in Russia's victory and not just in filling their own pockets, which will be immediately gutted if, due to their own fault, Russia does not win. Mill blogger Roman Alakina agrees, commenting, quote, "For some people, the special military operation is the patriotic war, but for many in power and in the military industrial complex, it's a business project that will bring in billions in a short period of time. For them, this is a short project and they need to squeeze everything out of it. Many there don't care about winning because they know that if there is Bitcoin and other options for withdrawing money to offshore accounts, so that by earning in a short period of time, they can provide not only for themselves and their children, but also for their grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Because of this, projects that provide an opportunity to save money do not come into being. Because of this, no one listens to managers about talking about lean technologies, and projects that allow protecting transport, UAVs, airplanes, etc. do not come into being. Well, this is except for cases of outright sabotage in the interests of our enemy. And also this happens. Unfortunately, the price of all this is not only in money, but also in the lives of the Russian people. But we are the only ones who regret this, because for businessmen, money has no smell, and someone in power may be fulfilling the order of globalists to reduce the number of Russians in Russia. So really, you can feel the anger here, but the issue is quite, I mean, yeah, it's pretty horrific if you are someone who's developed the tech that can save Russian lives from a Russian point of view, and save Russian rubles and create more efficient and better protected equipment, but you're being palmed off because, hey, that's not going to line our pockets. Okay, more on Russian FPVs. This is an FPV frame. Roy here, who's a great source, says FPV frames for both sides have typically been made from tough, rigid and light carbon fiber components. As FPV production goes into the millions, other materials like this printed Russian plastic frame are being tried as alternatives. After a few falls, apparently from about 20 feet, an arm broke and it cannot be repaired. That's why hobbyist FPV frames for racing are tough carbon fiber, because they crash a lot. But of course, you know, if you're just a one-way FPV drone, then it doesn't matter if you crash. You're not picking it up and repairing it. You're sending it in with a bomb attached to it. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of work on both sides in trying to innovate the best materials to make these drones out of. And we've seen these rooms full of 3D printing presses, printing components and whatnot. Russian V2U drones use AI for autonomous strikes in Ukraine's Sumy Oblast, according to Euromaidan Press. A Chinese mini computer and American processor enable Russia's V2U drone to select targets autonomously using artificial intelligence, according to Ukraine's main intelligence directorate. So that is a concern. I've talked to you about, there being innovation on both sides. The Russians have, here we have more information on the VTU, equipped with only one GPS module, which probably indicates the Russians' refusal to use satellite navigation. Presumably, navigation is used using computer vision. The drone compares the image from the camera with preloaded photos of the area. It can also be controlled as an FPV using SIM card of Ukrainian mobile operators. The drone is already actively used by the Russians in the Sumy direction. So there you go. That's a VTU. We might hear about that more going forward. What else do we have? So according to the HUR, or the GUR, Russia is currently producing over 5,000 long-range drones per month. So I think that equates as 166 drones a month. I did the maths earlier. Let's have a look at, so it says 2,700 of them are real Shahid drones, while the rest are decoys. So 2,700 divided by 30. So what does that, come on, give me an answer. Oh, why does that not work? Stupid Bing. Let's do it on Chrome over there. So we have 90. So that equates to 90 actually proper Shahids a month. Now that's interesting because we're hearing so many figures at the moment. Zelensky said there were 300 to 350 drones being built, but actually it turns out he was meaning Shahids and decoys and other similar, like you've got the Gerbera and the Garan and so on and so forth. And then he was saying up to 500 a day were going to be, a lot of people talking about 500 a day being the number that the Russians are going to be able to produce. In fact, someone the other day was saying they're looking at going to 1,000 a day. So the Ukrainians are going to have to obviously counter that. But the question is, okay, what of each of these drones are we talking about? So the GUR here is saying 5,000 long-range drones a month. That's only 166. So that's actually half of what is being talked about previously by Zelensky. So you've got 5,000 long-range drones a month, 2,700 are real. So that's 90 a day are real, while the rest are decoys. This is 5 times more than August 2024, though, when Russia was producing around 500 drones per month. So obviously we've seen, like last night, 479 drones sent into Ukraine overnight. This allows them the ability to stockpile a little bit and do that. But, we were under the impression that there were 300 to 350 a month, which is kind of double what this number is. 300 to 350 a day, every day of the month, which is double what this is. So I don't know. There are all sorts of different numbers being thrown around at the moment. I don't quite know what the reality is, other than the Russians are ramping up production, right? I think we can rest assured that's taking place. And we can see that in the much larger numbers being sent into Ukraine consistently every single day. And we talked already about the ballistic missiles production there. So anyway, that's enough from me. Really appreciate your support. I've got a bit of a headache now because I've been speaking for so long today. I do appreciate you guys. Thank you for indulging me in this obsession and talking endlessly about all of these geeky bits of equipment and whatnot. Thank you. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.